Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about A Clockwork Orange, written by Anthony Burgess. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, A Clockwork Orange is a very interesting novel. It's very powerful. It says a lot about reality and governments. We're in the 21st century. Around the world, governments are pretty powerful, and a Clockwork Orange, from my perspective, kind of gives us a narrative, a story about how governments can get out of hand and how governments can basically make a human not a human. In this novel, in terms of summary, in terms of what happens in the novel, we meet a man by the name of Alex. He's really not a man. He's a teenager. He's a teenager, but the thing is, like, this novel is just so violent. Um, Alex and his gang, in the beginning of the novel, he is going out in the streets beating up people, blood, like he loves blood. He loves to see people's blood out on the street. So this is like a novel where you have a bunch of teenagers. They're in a futuristic society. They're going out at night beating people. They're taking drugs. They're indulging in orgies. They're doing all types of things that we as a society have condemned as taboo. And Alex, he seems like, at the beginning of the novel, it seems like he's a devil, he's a demon, he has no morals, he has no ethics, he's just doing whatever he wants. His gang is just doing whatever they want. They're beating people, ripping their clothes off, ripping their property, attacking people. Like, the person doesn't even have to do anything to them, they just attack them. Sometimes Alex, he's just interested in horrifying people and in hurting people. And while I was reading this, I'm like sitting this, I'm like, who is this? What is this kid? What's in his mind? Because he's not Alex, the leader of this gang. He's not even 20. He's like a young teenager that's supposed to be going to school. I mean, the book mentions him going to school, but he's never at school. He always skips school. He has drugs. He's in drugs. He's selling it. He's doing all types of criminal things, all types of bad things, and it's like he has no conscience, no nothing, and he's just doing whatever he wants, and his gang just follows him. They're constantly trying to escape the police. They're constantly trying to hurt people, and it's not like they're gaining anything. They just like the physical pain of seeing people suffer. And that's the thing that horrifies me and shocks me within this book, because usually when people do bad things in terms of crimes, it's usually for some type of gain. It's not for the love of doing it. There's some sort of struggle that they're going through, so they just break laws for that reason. But Alex here, he's literally doing it for fun. It's like he gets a pleasure from hurting people. And in most of his acts, the book doesn't even talk about money or gains of any kind. It's just him hurting people, killing people, and he doesn't care. So this novel is very alarming. And the other thing is, apart from all, the shock and blood and sexual acts and, all of that, Alex is using his own type of slang. There's a lot of words when you're reading this novel. When I was reading this novel, I had to look up, I had to interpret it and do some research on it, because this book is narrated through Alex, and he has his own slang words that he uses. And sometimes it's kind of like you have to get used to his language, get used to the diction and the imagery that is used in this book, because Alex, he's not he's not the most Anthony Burgess is a great writer, but when we're looking at this book, this world through Alex's point of view, he's using slang, not slang that we're used to, but slang that's like a futuristic, his own type of slang and his own type of words for different things. So you really have to pay attention to that. There's a lot of websites that break down this language and break down the vocabulary of Alex and his gang and the words that they use. But it's the same usual thing that you would expect a gang to be involved with. When you're talking about horrible activities, beating up people, being threatening, going out at night, attacking people. I mean, there's even one scene where they find this man who's pretty much intoxicated and he's singing in the street, and they beat him up and beat him up and beat him up, and the man keeps singing, and then when they get mad at him because he's not crying for help, he says that whatever you do, I'm ready for it. I can't stop it. You don't respect the old people anymore. There's nothing I can do. It's this senseless violence and horrific acts that for a good part make no sense. What ends up happening is that eventually Alex and his gang they do so many bad things, and it ends up where Alex kills this old cat lady. And the cat lady, before Alex kills her, he wasn't like planning on killing her. It wasn't. There was no intent. It was just more. He loves to spill people's blood. And he broke into this old lady's house. And they get into a confrontation. They start fighting. They start throwing hands, and he kills the old lady. I mean, he's a young teenager with all of his strength. This old lady can't take a punch or can't take those hits. And when he goes all wild, she dies. And there's a level of shock too, because if you're an old person living, on your own, and this young man comes into your house and beats the hell out of you, and there's a level of shock, there's a level of weakness, there's a level of you can't protect yourself. So she dies of the shock, of the pain, of the beatdown. But before that happens, she manages to call the police. Alex gets arrested. He goes to jail. He gets sentenced to 14 years in prison. And his parents are horrified. His parents throughout the novel, they try to help him out. They try to steer him in the right path. But Alex, he just he did everything his way, how he wanted to do it, and his parents couldn't do anything. His mom in the novel, she's crying a lot. She tries to do the right thing, tries to take care of her family, but she's not portrayed to be as a strong character. His dad is not portrayed to be as a strong character. This young teenager pretty much controls them, and he dictates what happens in the household. So when he gets sent to prison, they pretty much rent his room, and this stranger comes in and kind of like becomes their weird son in a way. So Alex gets sent to prison. His friends, they all become different things. They all grow up for some weird reason where, some of them, part of his gang, some of them become policemen. Some of them, get married and get a regular job. While he's in prison, here's what makes the novel interesting is that there's this special treatment in this futuristic society where the government, they can't take it. The crime is too much. There's too much crime in the street. People are scared to go out in the street because, teenagers are beating them up. It's really messed up, but at the same time, it's a little bit shocking because you have these like 17-year-olds beating up grandmas, and it's messed up because you have these 17-year-olds beating up grandmas and peoples with walkers, and it's kind of like these are gangs. I mean, what do they have against old people to the point where you're beating up a grandpa, in the middle of a street just because you want to? It's like 4 or 5 teenagers corner an old man in the street and beat him up for no reason. I mean, it's like, it's, I mean, it's messed up. It's the violence is so off, the chart, that there's just it's a lot to get through. I feel like there's some comedy in it, in terms of it's just so senseless it becomes funny. But at the same time, Alex and his gang, and the fighting that they do, it just becomes like they're not human, and that has a lot to do with this book. So we'll get to that in the analysis later. So Alex, he's in prison. He gets a chance to be released early, and all he has to do is become a lab rat, and they want to reform him. They're going to condition him. They're going to they give him this deal. They're like, you get out in a few weeks. All you have to do is agree to this, sign some papers, and he agrees to it. He's like, oh, I'm gonna get out in a few weeks, fine. And so they basically make him good, right? They make him hate violence, hate crime, hate anything that's bad in society. And that has a lot to do with the title of this book, A Clockwork Orange, because the main idea, one of the main ideas within this novel, is that in order for you to be human, in order for me, you, anyone to be human, you have to be able to have free will. You have to be able to choose between good and evil. Because, if we live in a world where only good exists, we're not humans anymore. If only good exists, if you couldn't make any bad choices, we're really not humans. We're just machines or organisms that don't get to decide what they are and what they do. I mean, every single day, every single second, you choose to be good or bad, or good and evil. It's like, and this even comes from religion and philosophical principles. Human beings, we are not 100% good or 100% bad. It's this constant battle between deciding who you are, your morals, your principles, what do you want to do with your life, how you want to represent yourself, and what do you want to upheld. And so that line, I mean, no one is always 100% good in terms of behavior, in terms of actions. I mean, sometimes you treat people in your life in a good way, and sometimes you treat them in a bad way. Sometimes you ignore people, sometimes you don't. Sometimes, you do your job at your work well, and sometimes you just don't perform as well. I mean, in a lot of that is based on choice, on decisions that we make, on how we act, on how we behave. And having those decisions, having those problems, and having those things that are not problems, and all that amalgamation of choices and good and evil, that gives us a human experience. By giving Alex this choice to get out of prison and to be conditioned and to have experiments done on him to make him hate crime and to not do crime, they essentially make him he's not a human being. That's what they do to him, because they have a series of tests. They pump him up with drugs. They conduct various experiments. They put him into a room where he continues watching videos and films of horrific violence. They even show him clips of Nazi atrocities, and they kind of condition him to see blood, crime, music, sex, all of the things that society at certain points considers to be evil, considers to be bad. They condition him to hate it, because whenever he thinks about it, whenever he tries to hit someone, whenever he tries to do an act of violence, he gets this pain in his mind and his body, that it's unbearable. He can't live through it. So it's kind of like this tension, this feeling of pain, of anxiety, of hatred, and that they condition him to hate crime, because whenever he sees crimes, whenever he thinks about doing something evil, whenever he thinks about spilling someone's blood in order to make that into an action, his body abhors it. His body pushes him away from it. And if he doesn't do that, he feels like he's gonna explode. He feels like he's gonna die. He feels pain whenever he thinks about crime. So that's what they do to him. They make him. The experiments are very. They're very thorough, to the point where whenever he thinks about doing something bad, he just can't. So after a while, they release him from the prison. Certain bad, like the prison was in a good place. He actually, with a bunch of other guys, he kills a prisoner. So he was bad in the prison too. But after this experiment, after this conditioning, after this testing, he comes out of prison. He is reformed. And he's released. You're like, go ahead. Here's some jobs you can look for as a free individual. And again, this is a teenager, but he's a free man now, and he's back in the world. And they tell him he can do whatever he wants. And keep in mind that before he went into prison, this guy had a lot of enemies because he was just randomly attacking people in the street. So he's out in the world again. He goes back home. His parents are surprised. They're like, "How are you back home? We gave your room away." And all of this stuff is gone because the police took it to sell it off, because apparently there's a law in this society where you have to give compensation to your victims. So they sold all his stuff to give compensation to his victims. And he finds this new guy there at his house, and he hates him. And this guy is like a new son to him. His parents rented his room out to this guy, right? And this guy is, he becomes like their son, his parents' son, and he hates Alex. And this guy asks Alex, and Alex and this guy, they get into a shouting match, and pretty much Alex gets kicked out, or he kicks himself out. And he's on the street. He goes to a library because he comes to the point where he wants to commit suicide. Alex wanted to commit suicide because he loved classical music. But the thing is, like, whenever he listened to classical music, he felt pain and hatred and despair because of his conditioning. Because his conditioning, the testing and the experiments that they did on him to make him hate crime and hate violence, they also made him hate classical music, and he loved classical music, which is very an interesting part of this novel because, classical music and crime, it's something that, a lot of people usually associate classical music with, the cream of the crop of society, with, the white gloves and tea time, and British voices and good society, high class society. Classical music is often associated with wealth and power and prestige, not with criminals. So it's an interesting part where Alex, this dude who's killing people in the street, he loves classical music. So that says a lot about him. It's an interesting part of the novel. He hates his life. All of the things that he enjoyed, he can't look at women because he's conditioned to hate women too. He's conditioned to hate sex, drugs, everything. So he comes to the point when he was released after this conditioning that he wants to commit suicide. He goes to a library to find a book on how to commit suicide without pain, and he can't find anything that helps him out. And then a bunch of old people remember him that he killed an old lady, and they also remember that he used to like beat them. Alex used to beat these old people, so they all like retaliate. They try to attack him, but they're a bunch of old men with walkers. They can't really hit anyone, so Alex is just like standing in between them. He won't hit back or push them off of him because he feels pain when he does anything violent. The cops end up coming. They make the old men come off of him. They arrest Alex. They bring him out into like a snowy place, or like where there's no witnesses. And the cops, a lot of them are like his old friends from his gang. They all became cops. A lot of them became cops, and they beat Alex. They give him a good beating. They know all about his conditioning, so they don't take him to jail. He didn't even commit any crime, so they wouldn't take him to jail. They just beat him up. They just beat him up for a while. And then, because they're all crooked cops. They're all crooked. So in this novel, another thing that's really messed up is that the government has its own motive. The police have their own motive. The criminals are just they look like they're not human beings. They seem like they're not human beings because there's no, some of their crimes are not even there's no incentive behind it. And it's just there's a lot of things going on in the novel that seem like a mess. And so he gets beaten up by these police, and then he starts walking by himself, and he finds this old house. It looks warm from the outside. It looks like a welcoming place, and he knocks at the door. This is after the cops beat him up, and this old man opens the door, and the old man, he's like, "Man, you're beaten up. The cops did something bad to you." The old man, makes him take a shower, gives him food, and Alex is like, "Who are you? How are you so nice? And why do you live alone in this old house?" And the old man said, "I used to be married. I used to be with my wife in this house, but a bunch of kids broke in and raped my wife and killed her." And that's Alex's crew. So the old man doesn't figure, he's also a writer and author. He has a lot of books and literature. And so the old man, he didn't know about this at first, but later he learns about Alex and his past and how, he beat a lot of old people and committed a lot of crimes. And the old man helps Alex in one way to bring, the one way that he helps Alex is that, number one, he helps Alex get deconditioned, and the experiment just, they take it off of him or processes him, or in other way, the best way I could explain this is that they made him normal again, right? So whatever they did to him, they took it out, they reduced it, or they got rid of it. I'm not a scientist, so that's how I can explain that. The old man, he writes a paper about how this testing that the government is doing on criminals, it's unethical. And there is a part of the novel where there's a chaplain at the prison that says this is unethical, this is not moral. But the government is only concerned about lowering crime and getting rid of crime. And they're saying if we can condition these people not to do this, it's a win-win for everyone. But it's not, because you're taking free will away. You're making humans, orange organisms. They're not really humans. And so this old man, he writes about it. He gets other colleagues to participate, and they pretty much start this petition, or this. They're going to use Alex to basically show that the government is doing something wrong, is doing something that's not ethical. And one of the other thing that they did is that they locked Alex into this room. They played a classical music, and Alex felt a lot of pain, and he couldn't live anymore. The old man locked him in there with his colleagues, and they were watching him. They were observing him when they put him in this room of classical music, something that he loved. And he ends up jumping out of the window because he just couldn't take it. And he lands on the sidewalk with a lot of broken bones, bruises, you name it, falling from the window. And the building's not fun. It wasn't high enough to kill him, but he's badly injured. He's taken to the hospital. The old man and his colleagues, they prove, that this experiment, this conditioning is unethical. It's not moral. It takes people's freedoms away. It takes people's free will away. They take it away from Alex, and everybody's kind of, the government's not happy because now they're being challenged. Public opinion's changed towards them. And so Alex signs a bunch of paperwork. They take the conditioning away. He doesn't go back to prison, but, he's older, much older now. All of his friends have moved on. Some of them are cops. Some of them are, working minimum jobs and jobs just to get by. And he's now an old man, and he's thinking about his, family, sitting by a fire and having a life after that. And the novel kind of ends like that, with Alex kind of, in a way, changing in a way. He doesn't go back to crime, so at least there's that. He doesn't go back to beating up people senselessly in the street, although we do get his old personality back because his parents, came to the hospital when he was in the hospital, and they told him he can come back home. They told him, we want you back, son. It was all the government's doing. They're the one that, they're the ones that turned us against you. And he like curses his mom out. He curses everybody out in this novel. Alex is just a loose cannon. So he comes back to normal, but he doesn't go back to, bludgeoning people out in the street. So that's Alex's life, from unruly teenager to conditioned organism to back to normal, without the violence, and a little bit more calm, and trying to do better with his life. In terms of a deeper meaning, in terms of analysis, in terms of what to notice within this work, it's there's a theme of good versus evil, or do we need evil in a society where everybody's trying to do good? I mean, everywhere, all over the world, good is emphasized. Being good, doing what's right, doing what's doing what society wants, what governments want. Most people, that's what we align ourselves with, because it keeps everything moving. It keeps everyone safe. But the thing is, like, we also need free will, because without free will, we're not human beings. We make decisions, we make choices, we decide what our lives, where they go, and what we're going to do in our lives. By taking Alex's, choice to be evil or good away, he's not a human. He becomes an organism that has sweet juices and orange juices, that, has one mode, or you can only do one thing, whether it is you're good or evil. And Alex, he was processed and conditioned to be good, because he was so evil, the government just wanted him to stop. So they came up with this conditioning, this experiment, this testing, and it failed because they took his freedoms away, and it was all, they just made him a being that wanted to commit suicide. Making humans commit suicide in regards to that's not a good way to stop crime, by turning off a part of a person's mind, right? By conditioning him to not have free will. He wanted to commit suicide, and that's not a great way, or that's not a way to stop crime, because he's still a human being. He should have choices. He should have free will. But they take that away. So the government in the book is a totalitarian government by its actions, because most of the actions by the police, by the government, they're very aggressive, and it's almost like there's you don't have a choice if you are Alex. They just came down on you like a brick. So that theme of good versus evil, or do we need evil in a society in order for good to exist? Because you need to balance those out, right? You need to balance those out to be a human being. Another thing that is significant about this work is just what is Alex really like? Because at the beginning of the novel, it kind of seemed like he was just pure evil, right? This character just seemed like he was pure evil. I mean, Alex was enjoying beating people. He wanted to see their blood. He wanted to see them cry. He wanted to see them scream. He wanted to break bones. And this kid, this like teenager, he felt like there was nothing wrong with that. So there is a question of, was Alex just pure evil? Which is hard to believe, because most normal human beings, we care about other people. We try to help other people. So there's a question of, was there any good in Alex? And if there wasn't any good with Alex, is there some type of mental issue there? Because if he just likes violence and likes blood, that is, for most beings on Earth, for most humans, that is not human. Because most of us, we were not all about hurting people and enjoying, enjoying dishing out pain to people. His other colleagues, it seems as if they found a good way. Like, some of them became cops. Some of them became normal. So maybe it was because of they were teenagers and they had to grow out of that phase. But Alex, the only reason why he did a little bit better at the end of the novel was because he had been through so much, and his experiences just left them high and dry, and it's almost like by the end of the novel, he's not like saying he's going to be. I mean, we can assume he's going to be good forever and enjoy a calm and peaceful life, and there is that type of resolution at the end of the novel. But I think that's because of societal pressure that he accepts this, right? Because this kid, by his own will, at the beginning of the novel, I think that was his true will. By his true will, his true nature was blood and carnage, like a real live devil. So there's all of that going in this novel. It's true Alex at the beginning of the novel. It was all about sex, drugs, crimes, beating up people, blood, no remorse, no conscience. That was Alex, and that kind of describes a Clockwork Orange because he was like an organism just built for evil, but he is in a way pushed towards good by his government, and that if he's good 100% of the time, that's also a Clockwork Orange, an organism just built for good, but that's just not the way for a human being to exist. In my own personal views on this book, it's just a fascinating book. I think that it says a lot about just governments in general. I think we're in the 21st century right now, but I feel like in the future, governments around the world might have this power. I mean, mind control, conditioning people. I think that every day, I mean, now in the 21st century, governments they're already playing with genetics, right? They're already playing with genetics. I mean, certain countries around the world, they're already investing in cloning animals, cloning different species. We're playing with genetics. So imagine how far we're going to be with genetics, or in the field of genetics. Imagine how far the humankind will be 200, 300 years from now. In terms of technology, who's to say that someday some government won't develop the technology to control the minds of people and make them think and make them act how they want them to act? It's not a crazy idea. You might think that I'm trying to be a conspiracy theorist or I'm way out of line, but the way that technology is growing, the way that people's minds can be altered, the way that even with genetics, how the world is changing. What happened to Alex is really not something that's impossible. I could see governments doing this in the future if they're pushed if their hands are forced, if the hands of governments are forced around the world to take these precautions, they might in the future. And that is something that's very horrific, and I think that's something that novels like 1984 and other dystopian novels have talked about for years. And I think dystopias and books like A Clockwork Orange, they have one theme of overbearing, overbearing governments that are too powerful, and that they might change what it means to be a human being and to live in free worlds and free nations. So that's pretty chilling. I'm glad that I live in the 21st century, because by the time all this happens, by the time this really gets a foothold in the human species and the human race, where we can alter people's minds and behavior, I should be a very old man, or I should be gone by then. So kind of happy that I live in the 21st century, and I won't be here for the high tech, unimaginable technology that can change the nature of human beings. So that's everything. I think I've talked for long enough in this video. Please remember to try to read this book if you want to. Form your own opinions. I was just talking about my opinions, how I viewed the book, my own summary of it, and those are my thoughts on it. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, or comment. Tell your grandmother, your grandpappy, your mom, your dad about this channel. Let them subscribe. We're all about thinking about books, thinking about life, thinking about reality, and novels help us do that. So that's everything. Again, like, subscribe, help this channel grow, and I'll see you guys in my next video.